Hello everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, Valuing Clean Drinking Waters. Thank you much for joining us. 2 Degrees is delighted to have with us the Environment Agency to hold this session today. Now we actually begin with the presentation. I'm going to go and give a few technical instructions. So first off, if you have any problems with the technology or audio, please use the chat box on the right-hand side to send a message. Select Home in the drop-down menu, send your message, and then I'll get back to you. Now you to ask questions throughout the presentation, and we'll hold a short Q&A session at the end of the webinar. Now to question, type to the Q&A box on the right-hand side of your screen, and then press Send. Now, if you'd like to connect through your phone, please use the chat box to contact me for details. And finally, presentation slides and a video link will be made available after today's webinar. So with that out of the way, I'm going to go ahead and hand it over to our speaker. Christine, are you there?
I'm here. Thanks, Vanessa. Hello, my name's Chris Tuckett from the Environment Agency. Very glad that you can all join us today. To say, it's the first time that I've done one of these webinars, so it's quite exciting. I'm sat in a little dark office in Reading at the moment. I don't know who you are or where any of you are, but I hope that you enjoy this session. It would be really good to have your question at the end. And here we go. What I'm going to do is get used to these slides. Okay. I'm Chris Tuckett. It says on the first slide that I'm Head of Water Resources within the Environment Agency. I am, but I also lead on bathing waters. So it's my job for England to look at our bathing water quality and try and make improvements. Arno Waszewski isn't with us today, but we've got Ian Dunhill on the line, who will be helping me to answer questions at the end.
Good morning, everybody.
Thanks, Ian. Right, contents. So first of all, I'm going to give you an overview of who the Environment Agency are and what we do, what a bathing water is, importance of water quality, and the rest of the things there that you can see on the list. Now, I know there are all sorts of people out there from different organisations, some of you from water companies, from local authorities, and I think there may be also some people phoning in from abroad. What I will do is pitch this very generally. Some of you will be really familiar with all this information, which is why the questions at the end will probably be quite important for you. Others of you, it may be new to you, but equally, ask questions, and we will do best to enlighten you on this whole subject area. Okay, so the Environment Agency. We would, as it says there, in 1996. Our work is around protecting the environment, improving it. We have a land and air focus. You may also know us for our work on flooding and flood prevention. We have around 12,000 employees across the whole of England. We were until the 1st of April looking at England and Wales, but now we only do England, and Natural Resources Wales cover Wales. It's our job really to enforce the environmental regulations that we have. A lot of those come down through directives in Europe and the domestic legislation that implements them in this country. We are responsible for rating those who discharge into the environment through extraction and discharge licenses. We're also responsible for monitoring the environment. We have both local and offices, and our role is to monitor water quality and to drive improvements. What's a bathing water? We've got 412 of those in England and Wales, 416, sorry. It's there in England and Wales. The majority of them are on the coast, and that's actually quite different to some of the other countries across Europe. So if you're in France or other places, a lot of your bathing waters are inland. England, the majority of our bathing waters are coastal. As I mentioned, the Environment Agency does the sampling. We sample from May until September. We take 20 samples a year, so roughly one a week during the bathing season, monitoring bacteria in the water. What this is about, a bathing water is somewhere where people go to swim, it's designated under the regulations. So designated in terms of if you've got quite a lot of people bathing there, then that water should be designated as a bathing water. That means that the Environment Agency will then come and monitor that water, I say 20 times a year throughout the season. Monitoring the bacteria in the water, the level of bacteria are and have decreased, and we've seen a significant improvement in bathing water quality over the past 20 years. Of those 416 waters, around 93% pass the minimum standards for bathing water quality. Just for comparison, back in 1990, it was about 79%. So there have been significant improvements. I'll talk a bit more about what happened last year later on in the presentation, but the trend is an improving one. But what I would say is that we've done a lot of work, not just our own, but with water companies and everybody else over the past 20 years. But in a lot of the most difficult stuff has been done. Now in a situation where, a lot of the easy stuff has been done, we've got to look at the difficult things. We've got to look at the various sources of pollution that there are out there. And essentially we're talking about fecal pollution here, whether that's from humans, birds, dogs, wherever it may be. We need to hone down for each of those bathing waters that isn't meeting the minimum mandatory standards, find out what the sources of pollution are, and work together to address them. It can be quite a difficult and complicated thing. Water quality is important. Those of you who are out there from local authorities, tourism, wherever you might be, you'll know this. Seaside industry is incredibly important in this country, worth over 3.6 billion annually, supports a lot of jobs across England and Wales, and a lot of people go to the coast. Of course, sunny weather, pack up, go to the coast, have a visit. You may not actually go into the sea. Coast and coastal resorts are really important to us. We value those resorts, and actually, if there is poor water quality there, even if people aren't going into the sea, I think it can still impact on the view of a resort. So in monitoring, we are providing information on bathing water quality. Many of you will be, if you're from a local authority, you'll be helping to display those signs at the beach. The information is often there at the beach and visible. As signs saying that the bathing water quality is not good, that can have an impact on the view of the resort as a whole. So I'm sure you're very aware of that, but it means that we do need to focus very heavily on water quality and do what we can to reach the standards that are needed. So, the source solution. I mentioned that what had been done and that improvements are being made. The main improvements have come as a result of our work with water companies, addressing source solution from our sewage systems. So sewage discharges and overflows, they are one of the major sources of pollution at our bathing waters. But as I said, there's been a lot of work done on those and a lot of more work coming to address that. There's been a lot of investment, over $2 billion investment has been made by water companies in improving sewage treatment works and combined overflows so there's less pollution coming from those sources. But still more work needs to be done in that area. Excuse me. Also important is runoff from farms and livestock, contain bacteria, and that can end up in the drinking water. So the graphic that you've got in front of you is I suppose it's a physical representation of a catchment. So all the different water courses and sources of water that might affect that particular bathing water. If you have farms in the locality, yes, if there's heavy rainfall, you can have runoff from those farms. and the pollution from them can end up on your bathing water. That's an important source. Animal birds, whether dogs, seagulls, whatever it may be, you might think that, yeah, there's not many of those. Can't really have an impact, can they? But if you've got relatively small bathing water with a relatively small catchment, those sorts of inputs for dogs and birds, and maybe actually even donkeys, can have an impact on the bathing water quality. So it's important to look at that. It's important to think about dog bans. It's also important to think about seagulls, waste at the beach, and what can be done to prevent birds. Also, what you may know is that the level of bacteria in animal droppings can be a lot higher than it is in humans. So birds, it's kind of 20% more, 20 times the amount of bacteria in their droppings as there are in humans. So although it might not seem like very much, it's actually really important to address some of those sources. So those are the main ones. We also need to look at surface water drainage, drain from urban areas. So you may have surface water drains that come out quite close to the bathing water. They can include pollution, obviously animal waste, what might be going through the drains, that can end up at the bathing water. So that needs some scrutiny as well. And finally, domestic sewage. Quite often we have combined sewer systems, but also have misconnections. And if the drains are misconnected, you can end up in a situation where your toilet system or your washing machine or whatever it might be going into the main drain at potentially could end up at your bathing water. Misconnected drains are a problem. I'll come to an example in relation to that at the end. If you have disconnections close to the bathing water, it can affect your bathing water quality. So a variety of different sources, a range of different issues to look at. And addressing bathing water quality, I think the opening thing is to really understand what the problems are at any particular beach. There are the inputs. What does the community think about that bathing water? Is it valued? How important is it? And how can the Environment Agency, local authorities, water companies and the local community work together to address all these various sources of pollution? So we have challenges. I mentioned that for the directive and the current regulations we're working to, we're at, from last year, 23% compliance. But from 2015, the rule changed. There are tighter regulations coming in place from a revised bathing water directive, European Commission. Standards for bathing water quality will be around twice as strict as they are at the moment, and there will be a new classification. So bathing waters will be classified as excellent, good, sufficient, or if failing, they will be classified as poor. At the moment, when we do bathing water classification, it's based on 1 year's results, so that we take 20 samples a year. That happens at the moment. Under the new directive, it will be based on 4 years' worth of results. So a rolling average of 4 years of results, so it's 80 samples that are taken, that will end up in a classification at the end of the 2015 season. So at the moment, we're monitoring for both the current and the revised directive because we need 4 years' worth of samples to report at the end of 2015. That sampling started at the start of last year. As I say, it's a new system. It's a system in terms of bathing water quality, but it also got a lot more emphasis on providing information for the public. So under this revised directive, there is a requirement to display at the beach about the bathing water, basic information about bathing water quality and what's being done to address it. The Environment Agency is also required to do what we call a bathing water profile, and that's available on the Environment Agency's website. But again, there are a description of the bathing water, a map of the catchment for that water, information about the source of pollution, and further information about what's being done on those. I think at the end we've got a link to our website. Some of you may be interested in those bathing water profiles. They'll give me more information about your particular beach or any beach that you might be interested in. But this directive is very much more about providing information for the public. Yes, tighter standards, but better public information. And again, those of you who are part of authorities, beach operators and so on, I think will already be aware of some of this. There are new duties on you, new duties on the Environment Agency as a result of this new directive. When it comes to classification, the first classification for the revised directive will be at the end of 2015. It's the Environment Agency's job to declare what that classification is. And that information will be available from us on our website. Excuse me. And then there will be signs up at the beach this season to say what the classification is. You've got there a sign that says advice against bathing. Bathing water is classified as poor. That sign will show at the bathing water for the whole of the following season. So for 2016, bathing water classified as poor sign will be showing. That's the responsibility of the beach operator or local authority, whoever the beach owner is. It's their responsibility to make sure that sign is clearly displayed. Having silence out there. So, clearly, that's for bathing waters, that's a challenge. We have around 55 bathing waters that we're concerned about, that we either predict may be classified as poor or at risk of being poor. Basically, we need your help to work on those. A lot is going on already. It has to be a real combined effort between the Environment Agency, water companies, local authorities and local communities to try and address those sources of pollution that I talked about earlier. So what do? Local authorities. I mentioned earlier things around dog bans, functions, those sorts of things. I'm sure any local authority that has a bathing water that is at risk of failure will have been contacted by the Environment Agency, share of the situation, should be aware of the risks, and should have good information about what they can do and what can be done to help. Yes, encouraging dog bans is a good thing. Look at the bird population. Could be telling people about putting signs up to prevent birds being fed, seagulls and the like. Around fixing wrong connections, I think is important. I think there are also messages that could go out to the local community and the public to help with that in the location of the bathing water. From the point of view of local authorities, you want to attract people to the resort. The local community, I suspect, would also want that. Really important to the local economy. So working with your local community to address some of these problems and some of the sources of pollution, I think, is really important. you've got a list of there, the various things that you can do. Beach cleans, I think, are helpful. Those such as Keep Britain Tidy, Marine Conservation Society are also involved in beach cleans. They're helpful in themselves, but I think it helps to engage with the local community and make them aware of the problems at their local beach and what they can do to help. That whole awareness raising side of this, I think, is really important. For farmers, in places the Environment Agency has been out talking to farmers where we think that agricultural pollution is one of the significant sources of problem for bathing waters. Fencing on farms to keep cattle out of streams. Manure management, make sure things don't run off and end up in the streams is really important. So we're working with farmers, but also local authorities and others talking to the local farmers is really important and helpful because this is really about addressing all the sources of pollution that there could be. Water companies, I've already said that water companies have made significant investments over the past 20 years through what we call the AMP process, the investment process by water companies. There have been a lot of MAID schemes, work on sewage treatment works, work on sewer overflows. A lot of things have been done. More to do and more investments are planned. But part of the message from us to water companies is to really understand your sewer network. If we don't truly know where the water is coming from and the pollution is coming from, then it's very difficult to address it. Water companies are also doing their bit on providing public information. So increasingly, more information are being provided about combined sewer overflow discharges. Sewage are also involved in this, another NGO. Providing, say, about when combined sewer overflows spill. You can get warnings about what's happening, and water companies are playing their part in that, which is a really initiative to help provide public information. And water companies are also doing their bit in working with local authorities and, again, local communities, and the Environment Agency is important and helpful. Businesses and householders, it's basic things about, I think, understanding where water and wastewater and everything that goes down the sink goes and ends up. Not sure that there is a great deal of understanding about that still, but really important basic things around not putting fats, oils and grease down the drain so that they block up, looking at wrong connections, making sure that your toilet, your washing machine, your bath are put into the foul sewer system, and looking at things like that, both for businesses and for homeowners. That's important. And homeowners doing their bit in terms of being involved with their local communities in beach cleans and those sorts of things are really helpful and positive stuff to do. I mentioned this before, an example. I think we've got some friends on the line from South West Water who's sterling job down there in Torbay. There are, I think it's about 13 bathing waters around Torbay. Really important for the local economy, tourism and the beaches and the quality of the beaches. They had problems there. For the revised directive for a number of those beaches, there was a prediction that they would be classified as poor. So back in 2010, an initiative started between the local authority, South West Water, and the Environment Agency to look at urban use pollution and look at wrongly connected plumbing. So what I've just been talking about, and misconnections and drains and so on. The Environment Agency did quite a lot of monitoring, trying to figure out, working back from the bathing water, from the beaches, up through the system, whether it was a sewage system or streams or whatever it might be, try to find out bit by bit where the sources of pollution are. And so we were doing our monitoring, but we were looking for bacteria. And as you work back up through the catchment, if you get a high level of bacteria, then you've got to be clear that it's somewhere near the source. I'm not explaining that very well, but it's kind of work through your network to get to a point where the water looks clear, and then work back down to figure out actually where that source of pollution might have come from. It's quite intensive work. A lot of effort went in at day. They found, I think it was around 130 wrong actions. So this was things like small supermarkets, I think there was a doctor's surgery, various local businesses, and homes as well that had wrong connected drains that were very close to the bathing water, that were really having an impact on bathing water quality. That work, addressing say 130 wrongly connected drains, around 7,500 cubic meters of polluted water was prevented from entering the bathing waters around Tor Bay. The predictions for Tor Bay are now much better. We think and hope that they will pass the requirements of the revised directive, and bathing water quality is clearly improved. Now, in doing that work, we need to make sure that the effort is kept up. We don't have new problems arising there, but it is a really good and strong example of the sort of work that can be done. The organisations and interested parties in the local community work together to try and address the problem. And those that are on the line who've been involved in that project, I'm sure you'd be very willing to help give more information about that. If any of you have a question around it, please let us know at the end and we can give you more information. Those main things that I wanted to say. What I've done is not for too long because I want to allow enough time for your questions. I've gabbled through some of that. I have to say I find it very odd talking to people knowing who's out there being silent. But I hope you've had a little bit of information now about bathing waters, bathing water pollution, the challenges that we have ahead with this revised directive, some work that the agency is trying to do, and also some of the things that you can do working with us. I mentioned our website. That's the link there to the website. There's lots of information around the bathing water profiles, contacts, all that sort of stuff. We post our results up during the summer on a weekly basis. So again, lots of information there. And you can also, if you have your own website, you can get hold of links to our data and pull that down into your website, trying to make our data more interactive and more accessible. So again, contact us if you'd like to do that, and if you'd like to get hold of our data more readily. That's all from me. Excuse the rookie voice a little bit as well. Thank you very much indeed for dialing in. Appreciate being there. And now I'd like to open the floor for questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chris, for the presentation. So now, to all our attendees out there, we're going to go into the Q&A session. So you can submit a question by typing into the Q&A box on the bottom right-hand side of your screen. So we're going to go ahead and jump into it. For our first question, we do get a few in the chat box, Chris, so sometimes I'll just ask those as well. So the first one actually is, why should businesses that are based inland bother with bathing water quality?
Great question. Well, it depends how far away you are. And also, I guess it's thinking about what does it mean for your local economy and your local community. For a business that's some distance away from a bathing water, are you reliant on people coming to that beach and bathing water for some of your income? If you are, then you may want to be involved in this and be interested. You'll also be aware that the revised Bathing Water Directive is part of, well, it's linked to the Water Framework Directive, which is wider and looks at all of our water courses. So work that we're doing for bathing waters actually feeds out to rivers, streams, obviously estuaries in this case, and some lakes. So we need to make improvements in water quality across England as a whole. Bathing waters are a particular example, but your help inland as well is really important.
Okay, great. Thank you for that answer, Chris. For our next question, how many parameters are considered in your water quality information? So assuming, what does that include when you release your water quality information?
Okay, so we monitor E. coli and intestinal enterococci. Ian is online and he can tell you about, there are some other parameters that we look for, but those two are the main ones that a classification is based on. Ian, do you want to expand on that just a little bit?
The intestinal enterococci is the parameter that has been found to have the best link to health outcomes, and when you measure the quality of the water, you can directly link that back to the excess disease burden, as they call it. E. coli is a very common bacteria, and it's a wide group, and it's been widely used in stuff pollution, and it's in there so that we get some indication. In fact, whether these are in there, so you get some level of indication of whether they have any bacterial contamination that could have originated from either animals, birds, humans, anything that has the gut that will generate these bacteria.
Thank you, Chris and Ian, for that. So this one ties into that question, I believe. What are the health and non-health impacts of poor water quality?
Okay, generally it's gastrointestinal problems, so stomach upsets, could be respiratory infections, infections, eye infections, those sorts of things. Those are sorts of health problems that you're looking at. It actually is incredibly difficult to pick those up because it tends to be people that come to a beach, they have a bit of an upset stomach, be sure why they get an upset stomach, because there could be all sorts of reasons for that. So actually getting to grips with how many people are affected and how much is very difficult. Relatively minor ailments, but they can be quite nasty. Stomach upsets aren't great, especially when you're on holiday. In terms of getting statistics of the amount of people who are affected, as I say, it's really difficult because you might find that they go to their GP. It's really extreme. They might not do that until they get home from holiday, or they might just pop to the local pharmacist and get something to settle their stomach, or whatever it might be. So, probably minor health impacts, but also very difficult to judge the extent. Does that fully answer the question?
I think that clarifies quite a few bits. It's a very involved answer anyway, so yeah, I think that covers most of it. So our next question is, how do you deal with the general public feeling that they have the right of access to walk dogs or ride horses on your beaches?
Mm-hmm. Yep, a difficult one. I think those of you in local authorities will know far more about this than I do. But my would be those people who are coming regularly to walk their dog or take their horse on the beach are typically local people. I suppose it goes back to this debate about how much those local people value their beach and realise that tourism is important to the local economy. So I think it's probably around engaging with them, getting them to understand that. Something happens between May and September Clearly, if you have lots of people swimming at the beach outside those times, it would be good to have a dog ban and horse ban, whatever it might be, for longer. Those are the key periods that you're looking at. I suppose if you get engaged with the local community and let them know that at the bathing season, it's all right, but that period when we're trying to attract people to the beach, it's important that they abide with the bans and give them the really good reasons why.
Thank you, Kristen. And actually, for our next question, we kind of get into this. We are battling with local dog owners who are encouraged by the Kennel Club to campaign against dog bans. We have seasonal exclusions, but fear we may lose them, as well as organized dog groups get elected to our local council. Is there official support, or is there any support that can be provided for this?
I don't know where the person is who's asking that question. We have got people working on bathing waters right around the country. The Environment Agency has. We do quite a lot of community work, whether it's obviously talking to local authorities, but talking to community groups as well. If you want to get in touch with me or the Environment Agency more broadly, we may well be able to help in terms of if that relevant group is meeting. I'm sure we could come along and talk about what problems are locally and why a dog ban is so important. That doesn't mean it will win the case, but we could certainly give you the evidence around what's happening in that area.
Thank you, Chris. Now our next question, kind of change pace. We have a bathing water in Nottingham, which has just been classified. How can we ensure we have our 4 years of data to comply with the 2015 requirements of the new directive?
Right. Okay. Now, if you're in Nottingham, it might be that your first bathing water in the Midlands region, so welcome. Okay. Now, Ian may correct me on this, but my understanding is that actually in that situation you can get a classification on fewer than 4 years worth of data. Yes, you need to be classified at the end of 2015, but you're starting this season, so you'd have 3 years worth of data. That can happen in exceptional circumstances. Ian, can you just confirm that or put me right if I'm wrong?
Absolutely correct, Christine.
That's lucky.
You only need a minimum of 16 samples to come up with a classification. So if we have 1 year's worth of sampling, that will satisfy that, and you can do it. Obviously, our first classification is in 2015, so if we're taking samples from 2013 onwards, you're going to have more than 16 samples. So you have enough samples to be classified at the end of 2015.
Thank you for that. Next question, going on. We're getting quite a few, so attendees, you can continue asking your questions. We're going to try to get through as many as we can.
Okay.
So, what promotional activity is planned by the agency to inform the public of the changes in standards, especially as a result of the FEE decision to adopt the revised standards for blue flag applications effective in 2013?
Okay. I have to say, for blue flag, in England, that's the responsibility of Keep Britain Tidy. I believe are doing the promotion around that. We have tread a little bit cautiously here because blue flag is not actually Environment Agency's responsibility. Our job to make sure that we do the work in line with the directive, which doesn't come in until 2015. Now, we are doing a lot of making sure that people are aware that these changes are coming. We do local work, as I've already described. We've got information on our website. More. Also working nationally, and we put press releases out, and we work with national media. I don't know whether you've picked up on stories that we've put there over at least the past couple of years to talk about the results that we've had over the past year. But in doing that, we also add the result for this year, but bear in mind that things are changing for 2015. So we are making a real effort to try and get that message across. clearly it's quite difficult to know whether it is getting across, and we need to increase that message as we get towards 2015, because I'm not sure that people will really get and understand that message until it's much nearer the time. So, local, national media work, local community work is what we're doing. Yes, information via our website, but also working really closely with our partners in NGOs, local authorities, and water companies.
Okay, thank you, Chris. Our next question, I think this relates to your water quality information. Will a certain number of abnormal water quality results be discounted?
Okay. Now, would you like this one? This is your territory that you're working on right at the moment.
Okay, well, two issues here. I think you're probably referring to the abnormal situations part of the Revised Bathing Water Directive, isn't it? Now, an abnormal situation is a pollution incident, and it's something that is very uncommon. We would typically expect it to only occur occasionally, and the directive says in less than once in 4 years. An abnormal situation is something that's gone badly wrong, perhaps a cracked sewer, perhaps a situation where somebody drilled through a rising main last year. It may be an incident where a combined sewer overflow has become blocked, that type of thing. These are exceptional events. So under abnormal situations, what we do is we kick into our pollution management regime, where we put signs on the beach, we warn people about it, go through the local authorities, environmental health department and the tourism department, and so people get warned about these. Beaches are closed in that time, and during that time we make some samples to work out when it comes back to all levels, and then we resume our normal sampling. The second part of this is short-term pollution. Short-term pollution is a much more frequent event, and it's events where we know there are most diffuse pollution issues that are likely to affect the bathing water after rainfall. And we're currently piloting a scheme where we can try and take those predictions and actually translate those to signs on the beach. And very much going to involve partnership working with the beach operators and the local authorities, because we're going to be able to actually put the signs up, and we're going to rely on the people actually on the ground, on the beach, to be able to put these signs up. And these are just going to be warnings that things that we know are likely to affect water quality have occurred, and that's generally rainfall, or it could be high flow events, are going on, and we advise people that the risk that they would face of encountering that pollution is increased. So that's something we're going to be doing in a pilot study this year, and if that goes well, and we hope it will, then we're looking to try and make that more widespread in the following year, in 2014.
Thank you for that. So on to our next question. How does beach litter have an impact on bathing water quality? Is the focus sanitary / medical waste? This is from Andrea Harvey and Matt Cole at Plymouth Marine Laboratory.
Okay. Yeah, litter in itself might not be an issue in terms of monitoring bathing water quality for this purpose, because we're looking at bacteria. But if you look at the litter on the beach, if there's sanitary waste in there, it shows that there may well be a problem with the sewerage system. So litter in itself can almost be a bit of an indicator of what the problem is. The main issue with it, clearly it's unsightly and it's a problem in itself, but won't necessarily add to the bacterial load in the water. What do you add on that, Ian?
Well, other than that, the agency has the remit to try and protect the bacterial quality of the water, as you mentioned, and it then becomes the beach manager's responsibility to try and deal with the aesthetic problem that the litter would have. So we'll tell the beach operators when we spot it, and it then becomes up to them to come up with an effective means of managing it.
Chris and Ian for answering that one. So our next question, how do you regulate sewer discharges during low summer drought river flows so that they don't compromise bathing water standards? Most sewage treatment works within 240 cubic meters of water per day dry weather flow discharge authorization around. This is 6 miles upstream of a bathing site, but it's not a bathing water directive classified area. So, thoughts on that? I can also copy that into the chat box if you want to have a better look into the question.
Okay. All of those discharges will have consents upon them. Yeah, the one that you're talking about, if it's not included as bathing water site, the terms of that consent may not be as tight. In that situation, we would have done, or should have done, the investigations to try and determine what the inputs to bathing water are and whether further upstream particular discharges are causing a problem. Yes, the discharges are controlled through a consent. They may or may not have a limit on the number of times that they should spill within a year. As I said, if there is evidence that a particular discharge is having an impact on the bathing water quality, then we would obviously be looking at that consent, and we may be looking for an improvement to prevent such a great discharge from it.
And I can echo that, Christine, as well, that where we know a discharge has an impact on the bathing water, as a regulator, it's actually relatively straightforward for us to impose conditions on that permit so that it doesn't become a problem at the bathing water. The low flow conditions will be taken into consideration, and it's relatively procedures for us to be able to deal with anything that will actually have an impact on the bathing water from the sewage discharge.
Thanks for that. Next question: how far inland can diffuse pollution sources such as farming have a possible impact on bathing water quality?
Ooh, how long's a piece of string? Potentially it can be quite a long way inland. So some of our bathing waters, I mentioned catchments, so that's the area of land that water flows from into the bathing water, essentially, in this example. Catchments will be quite small. Some catchments will be really big. Like we've got some that are kind of something ridiculous, like a third of the size of Devon or something like that. And you do have to, as I said, work back up through the catchment methodically, find out where the problems are coming from. But it could potentially be some distance away. Those bacteria will survive. They could end up some distance away back to the bathing water and could have an impact. Clearly, the further the less they are, the less impact there will be, but we really are in a situation where we need to look at all the sources of pollution, try and chip away at them one by one. So, not clear-cut answer there, but you need to work back potentially quite a long way. Again, do you want to add?
Yeah, I can. I mean, we live in a country where there actually is quite a high degree of connectivity between the uplands and some of the catchments are quite small, and the time that it takes from rainfall to fall in the headwaters to when it arrives at the beach can be very, very short. For some of the larger catchments, it can take a few hours, even a day or two, and it's possible that the bacteria will be attenuated as they make way down the stream in the larger catchments, but it's still possible to have an impact. And so we're looking at all of the different areas that the pollution is likely to come from, and we try to deal with it in proportion to how it will affect the bathing waters. But there are not many rivers in Britain that have a possibility to arrive at the sea within the time that the bacteria are still quite active.
All right, thank you. For our next question, how do you account for residence times in the hyporeic zone? As a postgraduate researcher at Durham University, my monitoring is finding higher nutrient levels, biofilms, and pathogens. Assuming this is having ramifications for filter-feeding organisms, e.g. freshwater pearl mussel, and endangered species filtering up to 150 liters of water per day.
Ian, straight over to you on that one, I'm afraid.
I'm afraid I must express my ignorance in the hyperuric zone. Certainly the bacteria films are important. Bacteria are known to adhere to the solid drain. They can adhere to sediment. They can go through filter-feeding organisms, and they also control shellfish waters. So the bacterial input to shellfish waters is also very important because people actually directly consume shellfish water. Shellfish usually after they've been depurated for some time. So that's a little clarification I can help. I'm afraid I can't answer that directly.
Okay. So moving on to our next question. This one's less technical but still very important. Do you have any examples of public behavioral change programs, as I'm creating one for Macomb Bay and would like some examples of good practice? So has the Environment Agency engaged in any behavioral change programs?
That question, change type stuff, have to confess, is quite a new thing for us. But we're getting into it. And when I talked about the community engagement type work, really is what we're doing. We are doing behaviour change type stuff. It's just that we probably call it that. So, both in Northwest and Southwest, we are working with local community groups elsewhere across the country as well, but particularly in Northwest and Southwest, because that's where, in Southwest we've got most bathing waters. In Northwest we have more significant problems with bathing water quality. But yeah, so for instance in Northwest there's a group called Turning Tides, which is looking at Blackpool and some of the beaches around the Northwest. We are with them. Again, it includes the local authority and the water company and NGOs, non-government organisations such as Marine Conservation Society, and also I think some of the local community. So it's a programme of work where the Environment Agency is involved, but also it's bringing others to it, to get them to understand first of all what the problem is, and get understanding as a local community, so that they can then begin to work with us to start to address the problems. I know a little bit about behaviour change, but really understanding the motivations and the issues and what's important to the local community is vital. The title of this presentation was about valuing bathing waters, valuing clean bathing waters. Got a whole programme of work going on around the summer on valuing water in the round, not just bathing waters, but I talked about rivers, lakes and streams and so on, and also valuing water that we use. So there's a lot for us to do in really getting people to understand how important water is, whether drinking it, whether looking at it and they appreciate it for its aesthetic value, whether they're swimming in it, really understanding how important water is, where it comes from, what their influence is on water quality and also water amount, how much we're using, bring that across to people and to businesses is somewhere that we're beginning to go. And the whole information side of this is part of it, but we've got a long way to go on that.
Thank you, Chris. A quick question here. Who are the custodians of water quality in oceans? You cover that as well?
Now, again, remind me, we do out to a certain distance, but it's also a variety of people who are dealing with water quality in oceans. An agency is responsible for dealing with the Water Framework Directive, which will include what we call transitional waters, so estuaries and out to a certain distance in the seas. But we've also got the Marine Management Organisation there are other parts of FRA, as there are a real mix of different organisations who are involved in monitoring and managing the marine environment in this country. I'd be very happy to send you some links to some of those organisations. Probably the best way into that is to go to gov.uk, put in marine environment, and that will take you through to both DEFRA's information on that and various other organisations that are involved.
Thank you, Chris. Do you also consider marine debris in your water quality information?
We don't do, Ian, at the moment. The Fire Directive, I don't think we do.
We monitor for litter, and that's part of it, and that becomes us telling the beach operator that there's excess amounts, and that then becomes the beach operator's responsibility to manage that.
So, yeah, we've listed, but it's not actually part of the classification, is the answer. And one thing I meant to mention earlier, when talking about beach to debris, that sort of thing, is actually that seaweed and accumulations of seaweed, we've done some work that indicates that can be a problem from a bacteria point of view. So having clean beaches and perhaps looking at the amount of seaweed that's accumulating can also help in terms of addressing pollution problems, potentially. Yeah,
the seaweed can act as a compost heap in effect and actually incubate bacteria and at least, as a minimum, retain it, if not actively grow it. So the clearance of large piles of seaweed or the management of large piles of seaweed may be something that a beach operator can actually actively manage your beaches, fecal indicator risk from.
Okay, thank you for that. We're getting close to the time, so I'm going to try to keep going through the questions. I have a few comments as well, so I'll just pass those on at the end. Next question. With the revised directive, will you still be sampling at one location or across the whole defined bathing beach?
We will still be sampling at one location. Clearly that has its limitations. The location should be where the majority of bathers are, central point where the majority of bathers are. The key thing here is not the fact that we take lots of samples along a beach, but the fact that we are taking regular samples over a very long amount of time. And so we do see consistent patterns in water quality at beaches. Simple answer is we will still stick to the same sampling points. It's expensive. Monitoring bathing water quality is expensive, but having that longevity of the samples gives us a good picture of what's going on at any particular bathing water.
I'd like to also what Chris is saying there. It's you gain enough information over a long time to actually get some idea of where a bathing water is in terms of relative terms compared to other ones, but the actual sampling that you do won't tell you very much about what's going on this week, tomorrow. It tells you what happened over a period of time, and it gives you some indication of as the likely level of contamination that you would typically expect at that type of beach. Okay,
thanks for that. Along those lines, how does the Environment Agency find out where the contaminants come from? Is it that you find out about the sources?
Okay. We do analysis of the water to look at bacteria, and we can also define which sorts of animals those bacteria have come from. So it's DNA type analysis on water quality samples. There are some limitations to that. If you've had a great big sort of chicken dinner or I don't know, but gives you a broad indication of which animals is coming from, the fecal bacteria are coming from. And you then, as I've mentioned before, you work back up through the catchment, test samples, doing that DNA analysis, so you can work out ultimately which farm with input from a CSO or sewage treatment works, whatever it might be, where up through the catchment the problem is most likely to be coming from. I talk about sewage treatment works and things like that, but we're also looking at things like septic tanks. and domestic sewer problems. So DNA analysis of your samples, the answer.
It's a very important tool that we use, but a lot of it is just simply footwork and detective work. And as Chris says, we have a lot of people on the ground, and they do a lot of looking at individual sources. There's intelligence, there's knowledge, expert judgment, modelling, and there's just a lot of detective work, putting the pieces together to come up with an indication. But water quality is very variable, and what happens in dry weather can be very different from what happens in wet weather. And it is a very complicated thing to do, and it relies on us just building a dossier, if you like, of all the things that we think could be the sources, and then trying one by one to go through those and try and eliminate them as being problems.
Okay, thank you for that. So now, for our next question, and it's a bit of a comment as well, it's worth also describing the health and well-being benefits of living near high-quality coastal environments, such as reduced stress and anxiety levels. Late research from Peninsula Medical School seems to demonstrate this. Have you had a look into the benefits?
Yes, absolutely worth mentioning the benefits. I don't think we've looked at those enough. Those sorts of benefits are really important. An important selling point for our bathing waters. And I think one thing for all of this is that, in a way, we shouldn't worry too much about bathing water quality. Of 416 bathing waters, we are concerned about 55, but that means the majority of them are good. We've got good bathing water quality across this country as a whole, the majority of the time. The concern comes after heavy rainfall. You may have pollution events and problems. But absolutely, we should be promoting, all of us, should be promoting our bathing waters as a good place to go to from an amenity point of view. Yes, to swim, but outdoors and have a healthy lifestyle. So it is really important that we do that.
Exactly. So I think we're pretty much over time. I'm going to go ahead and ask two more questions, and I'll pass on the comments to both you, Chris and Ian, after the event's over. So next question: are there any comparisons amongst various countries' water quality, e.g. USA, New Zealand, etc.?
A difficult one, which I'll probably come in on.
Mm-hmm.
Different regulatory regimes analyse different parameters in slightly different ways, and they have different ways of doing it. It's very difficult to actually compare, because you're generally not comparing the same thing. Entry within the European Union is regulated by the revised Bathing Water Directive in the same way. So any country in Europe, in the European Union, will have the same set of standards that we have. I'm aware that the US EPA have slightly different way of monitoring, and they have broadly comparable standards, and in New Zealand I think the standards are similar as well. But it's very difficult to make that specific comparison between them because they're not the same.
To kind of get that clarified, it can be a bit difficult. So I'm going to go ahead and give this as the last question. How can businesses and local authorities begin to work with the Environment Agency on this?
Good question to end on. Absolutely welcome that. Right. If you get in touch with your local Environment Agency office, at the end of the presentation there was a link to the Environment Agency's website. So you should be able to get a link through to your local office from there. Contact them. Ask who is the lead on bathing waters. They can then start to work with you. Obviously, it depends where you are. If you're aware that you've got bathing water problems in your area, then there may well already be activities going on. And would be really, really pleased to help to hear from you and work with you. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris and Ian, for that. So with that, I think we've gotten through pretty much all of the questions. There are a few comments there that I'd like to send over to you guys as well. But with that way, I'd like to thank all of the attendees for participating today, for your questions, comments, and ideas. We had a lot to go through. And a big thanks to you, Chris, and you, Ian, as well, for holding this session. It was really informative and really good to have this today.
Vanessa, thanks for your help. So garbled on my part sometime. Next time I do it, I'll be much better. Thank you.
No problem. I think it went very smoothly. So for our attendees out there, the audio recording and relevant info will be posted shortly on the Water Risk and Strategy group on the 2 Degrees site. If you're registered, you'll be getting a link with those, so the video and the slides. So just wait in your inbox for that. Now, with that, many thanks, everyone, and have a wonderful day.